What's up guys, I'm Duba, and today I want to talk to you about my first custom keyboard and the things that I wish that I knew before building it. I'm sure a lot of you coming to this video have already consumed a lot of content from creators like Types who have awesome videos about really advanced and super clean builds for different streamers and YouTubers and things like that. And you're really excited about building your own board for the very first time, but it's a very costly investment. And so you just want to make sure that you're doing it right and thinking of everything and just checking all the boxes. I was the same way, and I thought that I had done my due diligence and really understanding everything that I needed, considering everything I needed to consider. But as with most things in life, you can always think of 999,000 things, and it's always like the 1 millionth thing that kind of breaks the whole project. So I wanted to go over the top 5 things that I wish that I had known before building my very first custom mechanical keyboard, and the hopes that it helps you guys out and you don't make the same mistakes that I did. So the very first thing that you're going to want to think about when building your first keyboard is, do you want to have a hot swap keyboard or do you want to solder and desolder? These are really important considerations because if you've never soldered or desoldered before, I would highly recommend that you practice on cheaper circuitry before moving on to your expensive keyboard and equipment. I did not do this, and I had never soldered before, and I actually ruined the first board that I built my keyboard from. So my keyboard is actually built from an AnPro 2 base, so the PCB and the battery are basically the only thing that remains of it. But I actually had to go and desolder all of the original Gateron Red switches that were originally soldered to this board. Now, I'd never soldered or desoldered before, and I'd basically watched videos to learn how to do it. I had a good sense of, the mechanics and the what, the why, how, all that stuff. But there's always a difference when it comes time to actually doing. And when it came time for execution, it did not go well. The first because I actually ruined the first keyboard that I got. The first AnPro that I got, actually I burnt out the board. I lifted a bunch of pads and then it was just a mess. So basically my first huge piece of advice for anybody who's looking to work with solder and desolder and all that, make sure that you understand the technique and you have confidence in how to use those tools, the heat, the pressure, the timing. It all matters. It can all save you or lose you a lot of money in the end if you're not comfortable using those tools. Highly recommend you invest in testing and trying and playing on cheaper circuitry, getting confident with those before moving forward with an actual solder desolder job. Now, in terms of the first build recommendation, after having done this, we go actually for a hot swap board. So there's a couple reasons why. So number one, easiest would be you don't have to mess with solder and desolder at all. If you don't have those tools, you don't have to buy them. If you've never done it before, you don't have to learn how to do it, and you don't have to risk ruining all of the expensive and scarce materials that you bought to build your board. So that's the big plus in my book. Now, the second and just general benefit of having a hot swap board is that you have the flexibility. So if this is your first board, it may be the first time that you're ever actually using mechanical switches potentially. So you may end up buying some linear switches and being like, well, I don't really like these. I want to try some tactile switches, for example, and you want to swap them out. Well, if you've soldered everything to the board, it's a lot more difficult to switch over and test out those tactile keys than it would be if you could just hot swap those switches out. And just to clarify, when I'm talking about a hot swap board, I'm talking about basically the ability to be able to pull the switch out of the board and effectively no solder desolder required. It's very convenient. It helps you kind of hone in on the kind of keyboard you like the most. And then ultimately down the line, if you want to do a more advanced build, want to learn how to solder desolder, you can do that too. But my main recommendation being, go for a hot swap for the first build and then work your way towards the more advanced techniques. And then again, if you do get to that space, please practice. Heed my warning, learn from my tale. I know that it's not really necessarily the hardest thing to do, but it's always worth just testing and learning and investing the time into figuring out how to do it rather than burning out one of your boards. So that's the first one. The second tip is, if you do end up lifting a pad when you're desoldering your board, you can actually salvage that. So I did not know this, and this is a tip that I couldn't find really anywhere except for the depths of YouTube and just, I think, like a random Reddit thread or something. But if you do happen to lift a pad when you're desoldering, And basically that means like the little ring that's around where the pins come out, you can lift those up and effectively just ruin the connection to the board, and then your key doesn't work, and your switch doesn't work. So if that is the case, that key. So the first time I did this, I was super disappointed because I thought I ruined the board. I eventually did, obviously, but at the time, I was like, that was the issue at hand. So I was upset. But ultimately, what I found out you can do is you can actually buy some jumper wire. And actually, a lot of soldering kits, my soldering kit actually came with some jumper wire. It's just basically a little bit of wire that you can strip, and effectively you can solder one working pad from a switch on the same row as that key to the not working one where the pad used to be. And you can actually salvage that lifted pad even though it's ruined on that particular slot. So I highly recommend, if you do end up lifting a pad, doing more research into using jumper wire. It worked for me and ended up saving me, from having to actually get a third board, because I actually did lift one pad on this board, my final product board. I was able to salvage it because of this technique. So highly recommend that you pursue that prior to just giving up and just basically buying a new board. My number 3 tip is to go into the building process understanding that this is going to be a labor of love. It's going to take a lot of time, in particular lubing your switches. So my biggest piece of advice for that would be, take your time, do not lose focus. It took me probably, and my wife, she helped me out, it took me about 6 hours to do this. And I don't know if that's just because we suck at it or whatever. This is a 60% keyboard, so quite a few number of keys comparatively to other boards. It still took a lot of time. It's just, a very tedious process, plain and simple. And there's a lot of people who like that. I'm not one of them. I did not enjoy that process. It was very time intensive, very mind numbing. We just kind of threw on a Netflix show and kind of did it. But the piece of advice I would give going into that is, try your absolute best to not lose focus as you're doing it. The reason being is, once it was all said and done, the problem that I found is that, and I imagine this probably happened like 3 or 4 hours into this, I kind of got a little bit lazy. I've been doing it for a while, and it was just kind of, again, mind-numbing type work. And what that resulted in is basically some of my keys just not feeling consistent. And that's a very uncomfortable feeling when you're typing on your board, and 90% of the keys are fantastic and super consistent, and then you hit like 1 or 2 keys and they're super over lubed or they're super under lubed, and it's just like a textural difference, and it's very unpleasant, especially with the amount of time and money and care you put into a build like this. It's just upsetting, that attention to detail aspect of it to run into that. And so I ended up having to desolder some of those keys and then basically rework them, relube them, and then ultimately reinstall them and resolder them. So my recommendation is, and this is just something to keep in the back of your mind, just please try and stay focused. It's all about consistency. If you're doing them all a little bit wrong, do them all a little bit wrong. You know what I mean? It's better that they all feel the same than like 80% of them feel really good and then like 10% of them feel pretty good and then the other 10% feel like not very good. It's very uncomfortable typing on a very inconsistent board. So that's my second tip, is to just be cognizant of keeping things very consistent and just hang in there while you're lubing your keys. My 4th tip for building your first mechanical keyboard would be, plan for contingency costs. So this one ended up biting me in the butt kind of hard. Like I had mentioned before, I felt like I planned pretty well on this. I watched a lot of videos. I tried my best to do a lot of research and due diligence. But it just happens, right? There's things that you don't think of. And so those ended up costing me upwards of $50 on top of what I had planned for my build, which is really, it's upsetting, because the original plan for this board was something, I think it was like $200, and it ended up being like $250 or maybe even a little above that. There's things that you just don't think about. So what I'm not asking you to do is to, understand what the things you're not thinking about are, because that's just like mind numbing. Like if you could think of them, you would, obviously. What I'm asking you to do is plan a contingency budget into your budget. And that's really the only thing you can do. And in the worst case scenario, you end up doing everything perfectly and you got like 30 extra bucks after. So that's pretty great. It's pretty low risk, high reward. Just make sure you're prepared, because it just really sucks to be in the moment and just have all this momentum and your parts come in and you're building, and then you run into, oh, I don't have this tool, or so on and so forth. I kind of ran into that with mine. The M Pro 2 has a hex screwdriver that it requires to actually remove the plate from the case. I didn't have one, so I had to order one. So it was, I had to wait a couple days for that to come in. And, you know, I mean, it's like, it's not the end of the world, but it's just, you know, it's just something to think about, right? I mean, it's things like that, and they accumulate. There was a couple other things as well. Like, the silliest one for me was when I built my board, I got so excited, I forgot I actually had to buy a soldering iron. So I knew I had to solder, but I didn't account for it in my budget. And that was like an extra 20 bucks. And I think the solder sucker was like 10 bucks. So, I mean, you know, that's a really egregious example, but the point stands that it's best to plan for things that you don't think of and be surprised at the end than to basically go in with a very strict and tight budget and then be in a situation where you have to basically pull back and wait till you have the funds to move forward. So that's my fourth piece of advice. So my fifth and final piece of advice would be, if you're looking into building your first custom board, I talked a little bit before about patience when it comes to the build itself. When you're talking about lubing, go into this with the understanding that this is a very niche enthusiast market. With a niche enthusiast market comes scarcity, and with scarcity comes long wait times. So go into this thing understanding it is going to be a process. It's going to be you accumulating the parts that you want. It's fine to have backup plans and to settle for other things that are close enough. Otherwise, you may not ever be able to build something if you keep missing out on a group buy, for example. But just go in with a very healthy, patient mindset is what I would say. If you go in with this kind of Amazon Prime, like 2-day shipping, headspace, you're going to be really disappointed. You're going to get very frustrated. And this is just kind of the nature of being in a very enthusiast community that doesn't have like super high volume manufacturing companies producing for it. I mean, now it's growing. It's a growing group of people and companies, but it's still very artisanal and very small, tight-knit community. So go in there with a healthy mindset. Understand that this could take upwards of half a year plus, sometimes even more, to receive certain components that you really, really want, whether it be a really, really nice keycap set, a really, really nice case for your keyboard, you know, a desk mat, whatever. A lot of this stuff is artisanal or very custom and very back ordered. So just go in, again, healthy mindset, be patient, understand that it is going to be a labor of love and very much a process of accumulation. Anyway, guys, I hope you guys found this video helpful. I tried to cover everything that I could think of going through my build. The rest of the stuff in terms of the actual fundamentals of building a keyboard, I might go into a little bit later. But for now, I would highly recommend, again, check out channels like Teha Types, Wildcat, different folks like that who have done really successful, consistent builds. They understand the newest, greatest, and latest techniques and tools, and they are awesome resources to learn how to build a keyboard and from the ground up and basically understand all the different parts that go into it and the things you want to think about. So highly recommend go to those channels. But I really appreciate you watching this video. If you do like it, please like and subscribe below. Trying to grow this channel and also my Twitch community as well. My Twitch channel is twitch.tv/2_doos. That's TWO_DOOS. I mostly help people with their gaming setups on there, basically helping them with decor and helping them achieve their design and overall vision goals for their setups. So it's a good time. I help them with that. And then also we do a lot of gaming and things like that. So it's a small but growing community, and we also have an awesome Discord as well. All those links are below. So I'd appreciate it if you guys, if you do like this video, again, like, subscribe, feel free to join the communities. We'd love to have you. And again, thank you so much guys for watching. Hope it was helpful.